Senator Ted Lillie is here on Capitol Report to discuss further his proposal that would essentially eliminate government shutdowns. Senator Lillie, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
First, let's begin with why you think your proposal is necessary.
Well, I think this proposal is absolutely necessary. We've just come through the longest shutdown in recent history in the state of Minnesota and nationally. We're also watching what's happening on the federal, on the national stage, and it's mirroring what has happened in Minnesota this year. The citizens of Minnesota, the businesses of Minnesota have been impacted by this shutdown greatly. Our parks have been shut down, our roadside rests have been shut down, 22,000 state workers have been out of a job. State services have not been there. Businesses have been hindered because they couldn't get proper approval for different things that they were working on. And the citizens just got very frustrated with what was happening. We were shut down for 3 weeks, for 20 days, and we just can't afford to have this again.
Okay, so let's talk about your vision as you begin to craft this legislation. What happens, for example, if there's a budget surplus or a shortfall? You know, your proposal has programs and services funded at current levels. What if that is indeed not the reality?
Yeah. Well, actually, we're going to go back to the 2005 shutdown. And following that shutdown, the Lieutenant Governor, Yvonne Pretner-Solin, came forward with a proposal to do the same thing. And what we've done this time is I've taken her language. We didn't really change a thing except for the years. And what this does is it basically says that in the event that the governor and the legislature cannot come to an agreement, cannot come to a solution, then funding should continue at the same level as has been there before. So the funding that was there in May should be enough funding to keep us going through June, July, and August while we continue to talk about that resolution. So in my proposal, it's at 100% of the current funding. Now that being said, some are proposing 80%, 90%. The number we can talk about. Senator Gazelka is suggesting that we have a constitutional amendment. So there are a number of proposals that are out there, but the basic foundation of the concept is let's not let this happen to the people of Minnesota again. We cannot afford to have this happen. So in my proposal, we're proposing that the funding would continue at 100% of what it was before until there is a resolution or until there is a solution.
And it would go indefinitely if there isn't?
It could go indefinitely, but there's going to be a lot of incentive for the governor and for the legislature to find a solution.
Such as?
Well, for instance, on the federal level, they're talking about a trigger event. And the trigger event is that if they cannot come to terms, then in that situation there would be half the funding, half the change would be coming from the military, half would be coming from social programs and things like that. I think there's plenty of incentive to find a solution and to find a resolution already.
Have you been having conversations with each of the caucuses about this, just to gauge level of interest? As you mentioned, there are several proposals out there.
Yes. What we will plan to do, I have talked with Chairman Perry, chair of the State Government Innovations Committee, and he is planning to hold a committee meeting this fall to talk about this and to flesh it out and see what direction we want to go. And then in our next session, next January, we'll start to talk about this concept and we'll come up with caucus positions. But what we're talking about really should have bipartisan support. And if we do it at 100%, then we're not cutting anything, we're just leaving the funding at the same levels as already exist, as already are there in statute. So there should not be a political bias to this.
I want to talk a little bit about what you, as a freshman legislator, learned from everything, from the special session, the shutdown, and the subsequent negotiations that happened in those final days of that special session.
Well, one of the things that happened is in the shutdown, the Capitol was closed, and it was not open to the public. And by not being open to the public, people were not able to watch what was happening in those rooms. So it was a closed door, and some called it a cone of silence. And I think that's kind of a funny term, but basically what happened is the public was not invited in to see the process as it was happening, to have input into it. Now that being said, there were, most of what was discussed in closed doors had already been openly discussed during the session. So a lot of that was already out in the public. But that can't happen. That's a constitutional crisis. I really believe firmly in that. That this should be open. We have open meeting laws. They should apply in this situation also.
And so that leads to my next question, which to some extent you just answered. Do you then support a bill that's sponsored by Senator John Marty, and co-authored by Senator Sandy Pappas, that would essentially eliminate this cone of silence and everything would be done transparently.
Yes. I have not seen that bill, so I'd like to see that bill. As most of your viewers probably know, I probably don't agree on a lot of things that John Marty does, but an open meeting process, absolutely. I think it's crucially important that government happen in the open. Our founders assured us that that would happen. We have many state laws that provide for that, and it did not happen in this case. So to me, having this shutdown avoidance policy, which by the way, there are 12 other states who already do this. Wisconsin is a state that has this policy in place. It's working very effectively. There's still an incentive to solve the situation, to solve the budget. Still a process of discussing the pros and cons of different proposals, but it happens in the open. By having this process, it happens in the open, and I think that's very important.
And I find it interesting, you were included in some of those closed-door discussions at the end of the regular session.
Yes.
And so do you think that what was said in that room is something, and some of the things that were said and some of the negotiations that took place, could they happen if this were done publicly?
I think government is a messy business. Some talk about that it's sausage making. And I think that some parts of this process need to be done between those vested parties, but other parts need to be very open. So I don't know historically that these negotiations, the internal workings of the negotiations, have ever been in public. I think they've been in private for many governors, many legislators of both parties. So I think that has been the process, but the overall legislative process should be in the open. It should be openly discussed and should be participated by the public.
Okay, Senator Lillie, we'll follow your proposal, of course, next session. Thanks for coming in today. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.